Have you ever wanted to change conditions in your community? Maybe you work for a road-owning agency and want to improve civic outreach. Or perhaps you are an advocate for safer communities and want to work for improvements. If so, this video is for you. This is how the Alabama Department of Transportation, the Federal Highway Administration, Auburn University, and the 50 Fund work together to engage communities and improve transportation safety. This is their Troy story.
Over the last decade in the U.S., pedestrian fatalities have increased by 51%, whereas across all types of traffic fatalities and all different modes of users, the increase has only been 7%. So both nationally and in Alabama, pedestrians have suffered more than their fair share of increase in fatalities and injuries. Historically underrepresented communities, including lower income and people of color, are historically overrepresented in the crash and fatality data. So ATAP, with its mission to provide technical assistance on transportation topics to local governments, saw a need to get involved in improving pedestrian safety in these communities. So Troy, Alabama, with its strong reputation and history for civic engagement, was a logical choice of a location to implement our efforts to improve pedestrian safety and provide safe transportation for every pedestrian in underserved communities.
The Safe Transportation for Every Pedestrian for Underserved Communities, or STEP UC initiative, was created to engage communities that might not have traditionally participated in the development of pedestrian facility improvements. As with any change, it all starts with an idea. Upgrades to pedestrian facilities are no exception. Someone begins the process. In this case, it was the Alabama Transportation Assistance Program, or ATAP, housed at Auburn University in conjunction with the 50 Fund, a nonprofit that brings experience in community engagement, supporting its mission of making communities safer.
I think an important difference for the way the 50 Fund does community engagement is we don't come in expecting to teach. We come in expecting to learn. The first thing we do is decide our learning goals for the project, and that means we come in and we listen. Solutions are easier when you understand the problems.
ATAP, along with the Alabama Department of Transportation, or ALDOT, and the Federal Highway Administration, or FHWA, provided the technical expertise. In addition to offering expert advice in transportation safety, FHWA and ALDOT provided seasoned leadership and encouragement to the process. In fact, when the STEP UC team identified a need for expertise in public transit and pedestrian facilities, ALDOT had the answer.
When you consider public transit and people having to have access to public transit, one of the main ways of getting there is through sidewalks or pedestrian facilities. And to have good pedestrian facilities that connect to the public transit routes or to the public transit station is a necessity.
Making any change, especially improvements to safety, usually requires more than subject matter expertise. It requires community participation as well. To help develop plans for gaining community participation and to document the process, ATAP was joined by the 50 Fund that uses an innovative street-beating approach to community engagement. Another strength added by the 50 Fund is the use of art to communicate with the team members and stakeholders. For this project, videographers and graphic artists were added to the team.
So with the 50 Fund, something that we are very passionate about is making sure that we are bringing art into all of our activism. We do have a hashtag that we say artivism is alive, and that's something that I feel like we are very good at bringing into all of our projects. Elizabeth here, she's an engineer, yet she can still somehow bring in art by color coding things and making graphics, and it's really crazy how we are able to implement art into things that you really wouldn't think art should be involved with, like pedestrian facilities, sidewalks, and making things more accessible for communities.
With the STEP UC team in place, it was time to find like-minded community members. In Troy, our first addition was Dante Frazier, director of the local public transit system. Dante has strong relationships in Troy, and people trust him. He was able to connect us to other members of the community.
This process was the biggest critical part was getting the relationships of our local leaders, Auburn University, our State Department, ALDOT, the local people that use these pedestrian facilities every day, together to come to an agreement to see what are their needs and what will best fit our city, so we can make sure that our citizens in Pike County and the city of Troy are able to get around freely in the pedestrian facilities.
Finding people like Dante who recognize the potential for change and are connected in the community is critical. Places to look for advocates are folks working in the education system, transit professionals such as local transit providers, youth programming leaders like the Boys and Girls Clubs, folks working for more active communities, and public housing professionals.
The sidewalks is very important from my personal perspective, because I walk 7 days a week, 2.5 to 2.3 miles a day, and it's great for my health reasons. It helps build your physical and mental aspects about life so you can live longevity. And that's what it's all about. And the sidewalks, it really helps out a lot in this community. And we need them bad.
With community leaders firmly on the team, we began to scope out the neighborhoods that were priorities for change. We centered our consideration around Troy's underserved communities with trip generators, places like schools, shopping, recreational facilities, and large concentrations of housing. After looking at publicly available safety data, we selected the Knox and Hubbard communities. These neighborhoods are anchored by public housing developments constructed many decades ago. The pedestrian infrastructure has seen little change since then. Next, it was time to collect street-level data with community leadership. There really is no substitution for street beating. So, we decided to walk every corridor and collect street-level data with our community leaders.
I found going around, doing the walk around was very beneficial to me because it gave me a first-hand look at our community and our needs, having the opportunity to engage the constituents that are out there in my capacity as a public representative of our government, for our city government. It was important to have that one-to-one within our community. We had the opportunity to see some areas where there are needs for improvement. And it was very organized and orderly, but it wasn't anything it was natural.
To document our process and record conditions, the 50 Fund production crew traveled with the team. The 50 Fund regularly uses videography to share ideas, so it was a natural fit. Armed with a greater knowledge of existing conditions and videography for support, community leaders were able to approach their elected officials with their ideas. In Troy, the community found receptive leaders willing to participate. After months of listening, and with elected community leadership support, it was finally time to join ranks with the community to walk the streets. Planning is very important. Comfort and safety rests with the team. Things to consider bringing for community walkarounds are supplies like water, sunscreen, first aid kit, and safety vests. Data collection tools such as a digital level, maps, clipboards, and pencils are also useful. It is helpful to use a standard assessment tool. In each community, our team used the Walkaround Guide, a tool for documenting the extent of pedestrian facilities. Many similar tools are also available. Using the Walkaround Guide, the group was able to map pedestrian facilities that exist and locations where pedestrian facilities would be useful. We also noted locations where ADA compliance was an issue. As with each visit, videography was a major component. Finally, combining everything we had learned, we produced an action plan. We included as many forms of communication as possible: written documents, videography, and graphics. The communication tools will be used by community members to discuss the recommendations of the walkaround. Clarity and visual representation are very important. With the full support of their mayor and councilperson, our Troy team is now ready to present their findings and recommendations to the City Council. As with any transportation improvements, funding will need to be identified. To keep communities aware of possible funding options, ATAP and ALDOT work together to produce a funding guide for communities. This resource is intended to provide a comprehensive guide to transportation project funding programs. For the Troy team, several funding options have been identified. The team is optimistic about the possibilities and improvements.
And it means so much when you're trying to serve the public to find people of a like mind that are willing to serve. And that's what the people on this team do. And it means the world to me that they do that. And we are grateful in Troy, Alabama for that.
So there you have it. The story of how ALDOT, FHWA, Auburn University, and the 50 Fund work together to engage historically underserved communities and work towards safer conditions for pedestrians. If you would like to know more about this project, community engagement, or pedestrian safety, contact the Alabama Transportation Assistance Program at Auburn University.